Alright, so I'm going to start off by saying that prostitution should not be legalized, honestly, since I'm on the negative side. But to counteract on what he said, what my opponent said in the beginning, how it would benefit the economy of the place legalized by David Short saying, Nevada is the only state to legalize prostitution, but it has an uneasy relationship with the industry. Though rural countries sometimes collect large fees from business, the state has resisted taxing brothels because of the stigma attached to prostitution. So, even though my opponent said that it'll benefit society and it'll give them more money to use for other things, it really won't. And that he also said about that prostitution should be decriminalized. And even though it is decriminalized, it'll bring prostitutes to go into business for themselves, and it'll just make the economy even worse, where then the people of the state will have to send out more cops and say that they have to control the prostitute level out there, because it'll just keep rising and rising because women feel that they can just do it by themselves without being regulated. And here's a good example of where they did legalize it and it totally backfired on them, by Janice Ramon of the News and Updates of Human Trafficking. She said that in the Netherlands, Germany, and Australia, legalization has failed to protect the women in prostitution, control the enormous expansion of the sex industry, decrease child prostitution trafficking from other countries, and prevent HIV or AIDS, all arguments used for legalization, but it has transformed all these countries into big giant brothels. And it'll just keep making the industry bigger and bigger, and that even though my opponent said that it'll be economically beneficial, that it'll just go out of control, and Anastasia Volkanovsky, who was the founder and former project director of prevention, referral outreach mentoring of the intervention to end sexual exploitation, says, the dozen or so prostitutes I interviewed said that they are expected to pay the brothel room and board and a percentage of their earnings, sometimes up to 50%. So the women in the industry are not even making anything at all. So they just get stuck in a ring. And they also must pay for the mandatory extras, such as medical exams, assigned clothing, and fines incurred for breaking house rules. So the women are not being benefited at all. They're just mere objects to the people who own the brothels. So how is this benefiting anybody at all? It really isn't. And like I said earlier, in a website by Procon, they asked, should prostitution tolerance zones be created, like the red light district, for police control, which is what I'm trying to counteract. And Melanie Phillips, who was a journalist, said that countries that have gone down this route, such as the Netherlands, Denmark, and Germany, have seen a vast increase in prostitution, and worse still, child prostitution. So it just made people exploit their own children to make more money, which is kind of the wrong idea of what we were trying to go for if it was legalized. So that's what I'm saying, it shouldn't be legalized. And it has also helped fuel the stupendous rise in global people trafficking. So people everywhere are importing women illegally and making the count higher and higher with people with no papers and stuff like that. And so my opponent also said that the women, if it was legalized, will have a freedom of choice. And when, Anastasia Volkanovsky conducted a research on the freedom, she pretty much said that Behind the facade of a regulated industry, brothel prostitutes in Nevada are captive in conditions analogous to slavery. Women often are procured for the brothels from other areas by pimps who dump them at the house in order to collect the referral fee. Women report working in shifts commonly as long as 12 hours, even when they're sick, menstruating, or pregnant, and with no right to refuse a customer who has requested them or to refuse the sexual act for which he has paid. And here's another example about freedom of choice, which the women don't have if it was legalized, that prostitution is an extreme form of gender discrimination. Legalization of violence to women restricts women's freedom and citizenship rights. If women are allowed to become a legitimate commodity, they are consigned to a second-class citizenship. Democracy is subverted. And about the abuse and violence by the customers that my opponent has said, Melanie Phillips, who was the journalist, she did a research in red light district tolerance zones, if they would help at all, and she said, prostitution embodies a view of women which is intrinsically brutalizingly dehumanizing and predatory. That is why the violence to women to which it gives rise is routine. That is why it is so appalling that anyone should be arguing that it should be regularized and thus condoned. And for more about the abuse, that everybody thinks that the women are being consensual, are having a consensus between the client and the woman, but it really isn't. Anastasia Volkanovsky said that, and contrary to the common claim that the brothel will protect women from the dangerous, crazy clients on the streets, rape and assaults by customers are covered up by the management. So they haven't done anything, even though the brothels exist. Now, if we legalize it, it'll just increase more brothels and increase more women getting beaten up, and will not benefit society at all.